Hello, everybody.
Ah, Dr. Nick.
That's right. My name is Chris Atkinson.
My name is Jeremy Scott.
Today, this is Recotopia episode 61.
61.
And we will be doing our big recommend will be The General, Buster Keaton's movie from 1926. Looking forward to seeing how you guys thought about what you thought about this movie. Anyway, acknowledging the chat. Who once again have come out here to watch us on a Tuesday. Thank you so much, guys, for coming out and watching us talk about some movies and things. And Jeremy, how you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good. My wife has been sick for a few days, and we just did a COVID test this morning just to be safe, and she's
Okay.
negative.
Okay, good.
Not
It's very
positive.
good. Yep.
That makes me and my spirits are buoyed because of that. And I was pretty sure that was going to be the case because I didn't have any symptoms, but she's got a couple of places to go today, and we wanted to make sure she wasn't taking that nasty beast with her.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have any small recommends for us?
I do. I've got two. My friends, I'm going to go a little nepotistic. That's not a word. My first recommend is a documentary that was directed by a very good friend of mine, a former roommate that I lived with for several years. It's called The Grove. Right now, you can find it on Revry. It's REVRY.TV. That is an LGBTQ plus streaming service that focuses on content for and by LGBTQ plus individuals. The documentary is about a tiny church in the middle of the Appalachian Mountains that a couple of years back decided to throw open their hearts and doors to LGBTQ plus people, in ways that most evangelical churches have not done or have been slow to do. And most of you probably know I don't go to church anymore. I was raised in a Protestant preacher's kid family home. I went to church all the time. But I really enjoyed this, and I'm pretty sure it's not just because my friend directed it. There's just so much love in this documentary for everyone. And it's like an hour and 40 minutes, I think, maybe an hour and a half. Reverie, from what I can tell last night, is a free ad-supported streaming service, so you won't need an account. You can just search for The Grove on their site. And watch this documentary and see the power of love. I've had two people I know watch it, and they've both really enjoyed it. And so I wanted to share it with you people because I do think you'll enjoy it, but also, I'll give a little bit of love to my friend's movie because he spent a lot of time making it. So there you go.
All right. Well, there you go. I was the same way. I wasn't the son of a preacher or anything, but went to church for a really long time. And as I got into adulthood, I started, I don't know, getting a little bit irked at the mentality going on in churches and things of that nature. So I stopped going. But all right. Well, I went to the theater again last week. This is going to be a good year, I think, for going to the theater. I think finally, like, some productions have gotten ramped up after COVID, and we're finally starting to see like a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff coming out in theaters. So I watched Air last week, and I believe this movie is getting basically good reviews, but I've read a couple of negative ones that are weird to me. I guess they're not weird to me, but like, feels like instead of focusing on what the story is, they have to focus on what Nike is, and I guess that's hard to get around sometimes, right? Because I mean, Nike isn't exactly the paragon of, I guess, moral companies in their in their day. So a lot of times, I guess it's hard to get around that type of stuff. But me, I don't really care too much about that when you're telling this story about how Nike got Michael Jordan on their, as their basically their shoe representative, and they're like uh because I just really love these kind of stories. And yeah, Nike is no underdog, but to Converse and Adidas back in the 80s, they were an underdog.
Yeah.
And so the big thing for them is they're not spending too much money trying to get basketball stars. They only, like Matt Damon, who plays Sonny Vaccaro in this movie, has a budget of $250,000 to be spread out among all sorts of other basketball stars. And they know they're not going to get Hakeem Olajuwon. They know they're not going to get Michael Jordan, because Converse and Adidas are already going to have those guys. So they look at the draft board, and they have, the rest. And there's a lot of known, like, people that you have no idea who they are today if you're from afar. But then, they're you may want to have a John Stockton or somebody like that. That's one of those people who came up in conversations. But Vaccaro realizes that there's got to be a way. There's got to be a way to do this. It's like Nike sort of wants to be a running shoe. That's the thing. They're not really concerned about being a basketball shoe. They say people put on their shoes, they go out and run. That's what they do. They take that same shoe that they run with, and they go to the mall, and they go to other places with it. They don't have any desire to have a basketball shoe. That's the philosophy of the company. And Ben Affleck plays the CEO of the company, Phil Knight. But Vaccaro believes there's a way to do this, and he basically sets out the pitch to Michael Jordan. Doesn't want to talk to Nike. Nike is not a cool shoe. I think he likes Adidas shoes. I think that's what they said. He prefers Adidas shoes, and he's pretty much going to be signing with Adidas. But they tell Sonny, do not approach the family, because apparently you have to get in good with his parents before you can get in any kind of deals. Don't call them. They say he's been told not to call them. So he works his way around that by going and visiting them without a call in the first place. Goes to North Carolina, and he talks to Michael Jordan's mother, played by Viola Davis. Dolores Jordan is basically a very sound gatekeeper for her son in this. And Viola Davis, do I need to say any more? I mean, she's fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And she's probably one of the early front runners to get an Oscar nomination for this performance in this. He tells Dolores Jordan that, here's what Adidas is going to tell you, and here's what Converse is going to tell you. And then here's what my idea is. We're going to build a shoe entirely around him. And so, if you go to these two companies and you don't like what you hear, give me a call. So that's basically how that sort of gets set up. And I mean, yes, there's no suspense here. We know that Michael Jordan is going to sign with Nike, right? There's going to be Air Jordans, and there's going to be tons of money to be made from all of this. But to see how the wheelings and dealings behind the scenes go, and like what Vaccaro decides to do, basically just putting all his chips in the middle and saying, this is it for me. If I don't succeed in this, then I'm moving on to something else, basically. And I understand some of the criticism of this movie, but I think it's really well done, really funny. Jason Bateman's in this too. Jason Bateman doing his usual, good work as well. Chris Tucker is in this. Marlon Wayans. It's a really fun movie. I mean, I guess if you can get around the fact that Nike is not exactly the best of companies in their history, but anyway,
I mean, I got around the fact that Ford v Ferrari wasn't exactly an awesome company to root for. I mean, although I have seen this movie air unfairly compared to that Ford v Ferrari, because I don't know that they're 100% trying to be the same thing. I'm very, very excited to see this. Ben Affleck directed. He's, has a really high batting average for me as a director.
Mhm.
And I saw in an interview, he said Michael Jordan only had one stipulation, and that was to get the greatest to play his mom, Viola
Mhm.
Davis.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
And so, I mean, imagine, I mean, it's an awesome role. There's a pretty good chance if Michael Jordan asked for you personally and you have this
Mhm.
well written a role, you're going to say yes. But imagine being Affleck going, okay, what if she says no?
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't end up having Michael Jordan's blessing. But anyway.
Exactly. Oh yeah, and by the way, Chad also mentioned Chris Messina in this. Chris Messina nearly steals this entire movie as as Michael Jordan's agent. And his the conversations between him and Matt Damon are freaking great. If Chris Messina had more of a profile, he'd be having Oscar nomination talk, but as such, it'll be a great performance, kind of lost in a movie that came out in April. So,
What's wild is that this is the screenwriter's first film. He
oh
wrote
yeah,
a spec script for this that was like on the blacklist, that, annual list of best unproduced screenplays. And Affleck started talking to him, and boom. So if it's well written, this guy could have a really good future. So,
yeah.
all right,
All
my
right.
second small recommend is a television show that I am currently in the middle of, along with everyone who is cool in the world, and it's called Top Chef uh, World All Stars.
Hmm.
This is the most current recent season of Top Chef. Um, and the interesting conceit here is that they have brought in winners and runners up from all sorts of Top Chef competitions around the world. What we often forget about in America is that our most popular shows have versions in other countries. So there's there's a UK Top Chef, there's a Top Chef Brazil, there's a Top Chef Germany, there's a Top Chef France, there's a Top Chef Canada, there's a Top Chef Thailand, Mexico. And so they're bringing in winners and runners up from all of these international versions of the show, along with a handful of American contestants from the American show. Um, and Top Chef is, a regular Emmy nominee for good reason. It's just a really high quality show. If you like food and cooking competitions, you don't have a lot of Gordon Ramsay screaming type stuff. It's like pretty straightforward about the cooking and the food. But what's interesting about this season is twofold. Because all of these people are winners, runners up, or came in third for their season. There's like 8, 9 winners on here. The quality of food is at an all-time high for this show, because everyone is top of their class, top of their country, and so I feel like it's upped um, the food quality, the cooking quality, the innovation over previous seasons, and it's also added a wrinkle that I'm not entirely sure is fair when it comes to speaking English, because the show is still being shot in and conducted in English, but English is not the first language for about half of these contestants. And there's one girl who barely speaks it. She speaks 7 other languages fluently, but English, she just kind of knows a little bit here and there. And I'm worried there's going to be some big kitchen disaster over a simple miscommunication of what a word means. So far, that hasn't happened. And it's pretty fun to see sometimes those that speak the same languages will speak to each other in that language, and it won't really tell me what they're saying. Anyway, I just think from a cultural perspective, it's a really interesting season. And if you've
Yeah.
never watched it, but you've been curious, this might be a good one to jump in on. So there you
Do
go. It's
these
on
do the
Bravo.
do the contestants maybe have interpreters who tell them exactly what's going on with
They
certain
very well
things?
may off screen. I have also seen them interpret for each other in a competition where one person
Okay.
will say something in English, and then the person who knows English better will interpret for somebody who doesn't speak it very well.
Mhm.
I wouldn't be surprised if they. I mean, I would almost think they would have to behind the scenes. So they film the challenge, and then they cut, and the interpreters all come out and go, "Okay, here's what you have to do. You have to take a squash and do something, with beef."
That's
And
my that's my guess, but I mean, who knows, right? We don't really know, but like I feel like that's you have to make sure that everybody's on board with what the actual challenge is,
Yeah.
and by so that by the end when they're presenting their dishes and everything, the guy's like, well, I asked for red pepper, where is that? And it's like, well, I put cayenne, or I put something in, that type of thing.
Yeah.
So anyway, that is very interesting. I don't know, I guess there's so many things that I follow in this earth. I'm like, I know I would love Top Chef, even though I'm not a big like guy who cooks things or
Right.
anything. I don't do that stuff, but I know I've watched a Top Chef and I'm like, oh, this is really good. But man, if I ever got into that show, like just don't give me any time to do anything anymore,
I
because I'm
mean,
just
it comes around every year, and there's always 15, 16 episodes. And yeah, I mean, the only reason I ever even watched it is we were on our honeymoon, and it was like 112 degrees in Pigeon Forge where we were at, and we didn't want to leave the hotel. We just stayed in the
mhm.
hotel room in the air conditioning and turned on the TV, and they were running a marathon of Top Chef season 3. And a week
Mhm.
after we got home from our honeymoon, we had downloaded the first 2 seasons from Apple and started watching them. So yeah, it'll hook you.
All right. Um, the My second small recommend is from the 1960s. It's Jacques Demy's The Umbrellas of Cherbourg.
Mm.
Um, this is this movie is have you heard of this, right? You've heard of
I
this
think
movie.
I've heard of it. Yeah, maybe.
This is a pretty well known from the French Wave movie, but I don't know how many people have actually seen it in, like outside of, like, I don't know, some hardcore cinephiles or whatever. But this movie is a breezy hour and a half, and it is a musical, and it is everybody sings everything. There is not one spoken word of dialogue in this
Hmm.
movie. Everybody sings everything, even the this most mundane of things. Like the very beginning of this movie starts at a gas station, and the guy's singing like, "Did you fix my engine?" And the guy's like, of course it's in like, it's like in French too, and it's not like really trying to rhyme or anything like that. It's just like people singing the whole thing. And so the story is about a guy who's fallen in love with this girl played by Catherine Deneuve. And she works at an umbrella shop with her mom. I think the umbrella shop is pretty hilarious to me. There's a point where there's a guy in the store, and the guy and then her mom's like, "May I help you?" And he goes, "Yes, I'm looking for something in an umbrella." And I'm like, "Yeah, of course you are. This is an umbrella shop. We sell nothing but umbrellas here." um but so yeah, so this guy who works at this like auto shop or whatever is in love with this girl who works at the umbrella shop. Her mom, she works it with her mom who owns the shop. And they're kind of in some way they're secretly dating, because she's 17, I think he's 20 or something like that. um and uh she does there's a point where that this couple goes to they go to Carmen, I believe. They go to the opera Carmen, and she lies to her mother that she's going to see this with her friend. And then she tells the guy later, like, "I told my mom I was coming to see this with my friend Cecile or whatever, and she gave me a look that said, I don't really believe you," and all that. So she finally ends up telling her mom, "Hey, I'm seeing this guy." And of course the mom is not happy about this, and that they're actually already getting ready to get married, I guess. It's like they've seen each other for like 5 or 6 times. And at the time, because this movie's set in the late 50s, uh the mom says, "How old is he?" And she says, "He's 20." She says, "So he hasn't enlisted in service yet." And France and Algeria were fighting at the time in the late
Mm.
50s. So there's this looming thing that he might go to war, and they're thinking about getting married, and her mom's sort of being the voice of reason. um the guy lives with his aunt, who is sick and is bedridden. And there is another woman that comes by. Her name's Madeline. Comes by and helps her take pills and things like that. She's a pretty girl. It's pretty obvious from the beginning that she really would like to date Guy. His name is Guy. I'm saying Guy, but his name is Guy. And it's pretty obvious from the beginning, if you've ever seen a movie before, that she kind of wants him or whatever. But there's a point where he does finally get his he finally does get drafted. It looks like he's going to be off to war for at least 2 years. And he and Catherine Deneuve spend the night together. I love how in the 60s they show how people have sex. Like she comes up to his apartment. They're alone. And as they're about to kiss or whatever, the camera cuts and it shows 4 different distinct shots of the outside of the city. After it does that, it's like, it's this weird, like, we're not going to show you what happens here. Look at the pretty city. Look at the pretty city. And then she comes, and right after that, she comes back to talk to her mom and says, and her mom's like, where have you been all night? And there's this long pause and this big camera move. And she's like, and then she doesn't say anything. And then she's like, oh, I feel so bad because he's going to be gone to war and I won't be able to see him and we're going to get married and all this. And of course we find out that she's pregnant and later on. Now there's this other man that comes into the picture. The umbrella shop is in danger. I know this is hard to believe, Jeremy, but the umbrella shop is in danger. You can't just have this prime real estate and sell umbrellas and hope to make ends meet. The shop is in danger. They find this guy who will be willing to buy the mom's jewels and to pay off their debts. But he also takes a shine to the Catherine Deneuve character, and it suddenly becomes a thing where he wants to marry her, but she's like, I don't know if he wants me. I'm pregnant. I don't know. And I don't know. I still love this guy and everything. I will leave it there. Because you want to find out what happens in this movie. Believe me, if you've seen any kind of romantic comedy in your life before, you do not know where this movie's going. That is interesting for a movie back in the 60s. And it is, like I said, all the dialogue is sung all the way through it. So the movie is gorgeous. They have recently restored it where all the colors are just pop, and the colors are a very big deal in this movie. Very solid, like very vibrant colors all the way through. I think you would really love this movie, Jeremy. This might be like right up your alley. So anyway,
Right.
if you can get past the fact that it's French.
Yeah, the French.
Fucking French.
I don't really hate the French.
Yeah, I know. I'm just disparaging them for no reason. Yep.
All right. Well,
all right.
I think it's time for the big one.
The big recommend. 1926, The General, Buster Keaton. And this one is this is based on a true story, believe it or not.
Yes.
This actually happened, although the story that it's based on came from the Union perspective. And Buster Keaton decided that audiences wouldn't accept it if the Confederate soldiers were the bad guys in the movie. So he changed it to that. And that's probably the one bit of thing that I take issue with this movie about, is that there's the lost cause of the Confederacy, basically, where we all, like, all the secession papers from most of the states say we're seceding because of slavery. We want to keep slavery. It all says that in there. But 60 years later or so, we can sit here and go, they're underdogs. They didn't blah, blah, blah. That wasn't about slavery. But if you can get past that, here we go. So Buster Keaton plays a guy named Johnny Gray, who is an engineer of this railroad, of this train called General. And we start off by seeing him get off of the train, and two kids look really interested in what he's the facets of the train, and they even follow him all the way back to where he's going to go see the woman he loves, played by Marion Mack. And and she hides or something from him before he gets to the door, and he goes up to the door and the two kids are behind him, and then she shows up out of nowhere.
Yeah.
And then he knocks on the door, and then he turns around and then he sees her there all of a sudden. And then they all go in, and he's wanting to have this like private time with the girl, and there's two kids just sitting on the couch with them, and they just kind of like usher them out. While they're sitting there, her father comes in, and her brother, and we find out that shots have been fired at Fort Sumter. The war is upon them, and it's time for people to go and enlist and volunteer for the Confederate Army. And Johnny doesn't really want to go, but his girlfriend says, "Don't, I want you to go and enlist or whatever." So he's like, okay. So he gets to the thing, and this must have been a thing back in the 10s and 20s. People going up to these windows with the jobs and everything. This was something that happened in the Chaplain shorts we saw the last time. He stands in line. He tells the guy that his occupation is an engineer, and the guy goes back and talks to some other supervisor, and he says he's more suited to be an engineer, to stay an engineer here. Don't put him out in the battle. And the guy comes back and just says, "We have no use for you." That's all he says. Doesn't give him any reason or anything. So he's sitting there going, like, he knows that he needs to do this for his girlfriend. He's standing there in the middle of the thing, and he sees one guy get accepted who's really tall. And so he assumes, oh, maybe they're looking for people who are really big to get into the war, and they need some real strong people. And then somebody who's exactly his height comes through with a draft card or whatever, or enlistment card. And he's sitting there comparing himself to him. And it's like he's the exact dimensions and everything. So he tries to go back into the line, and he pretends that he's some other person with hanging his hat over his head and everything. And then he says he's a bartender, but the nosy supervisor just notices this. So he tells him that to leave. And when he leaves, he goes outside, and just so happens that his girlfriend's dad and her brother are sitting there in line, and they see him just standing out there, and they're like, "Are you going to come in and enlist?" And of course, he doesn't tell them what happened. He just says, "Nope, I'm not going to do it." And he goes away. So what happens? The brother goes and tells his sister that he didn't even stand in line. So she says, "Don't even." I know. She says, "Well, don't." She comes up to Buster Keaton and says, "Don't even talk to me unless you're in a uniform." And so a whole year goes by. A whole year goes by, and his girlfriend's dad, who also went to battle, is injured. She wants to go visit him, so she takes a train that just so happens to be engineered by Johnny Gray on this day. And so they take off to go see him. There's a big passenger train, and meanwhile there are Union soldiers who are plotting to take one of these trains and to go down the line and burn bridges all the way down this line. There's a guy in the Union Army who claims, "I know every railroad track from Marietta to Chattanooga, and we will be able to destroy all this stuff." And so basically the idea for them is to get all the way to this one spot and join some general with their supply trains, and then be able to come back for an attack. So on this way, so on the way, the general goes to this one place where there's a stop where everybody has to get out and like have lunch or something like that. So the train stops. Everybody goes.
And I wrote down, because they only get 20 minutes. He says, "All
Yeah.
right, dinner, 20 minutes." And they all
Mm,
hop off the train. And I'm like, how the fuck is the restaurant going to serve all those people in 20 minutes? Like, Buster
mm-hmm.
Keaton, get your head out of
Yeah.
your ass.
Exactly. Um, so the train stops, the Union Army goes in, the secret force goes in, and they steal the train, and they take off. Buster Keaton is sitting there like washing his hands in some outdoor sink thing, I don't know. And he sees the train going off without him. He tells the people and like, "Hey, do you see that?" And they're like, "Yeah, I see that. Whoa, that's crazy." So he starts running towards the train. There's no chance in hell he's going to be able to catch up to it. But he gets on one of those like hand train things. He like do the little pumping
Yeah.
action thing, and but the Union has been like on some occasional stops. They've been taking off. They've been dismantling the railroad, so they've taken off rails. They're taking off like these those track ties or whatever they call them. They've been taking those things off. So he's using that little hand thing, and then at some point there's a railing missing, and like it skids off and it like falls into the river. Like, and he's like, okay, now what am I gonna do? And this is one of the more impressive stunts I think he does in the movie. He finds some guy's parking his bike. It's a bone shaker bike or something, one of those type of things that's outside of his house. And Buster Keaton takes a run right at it and jumps on top of it and is immediately pedaling
Yeah.
as soon as he. Of course, that doesn't last too long either. He doesn't last on that bike for very long either. He ends up going to another town where there just happens to be um, more of the Confederate army. He tells the army there like there's some I think some deserters. First thinks it's deserters. I think some deserters took off with my train, and so this whole Confederate army is like, yeah, let's go after them, let's go get them. And so Johnny gets on the engine and he starts driving off, but it's not coupled to the rest of the train, and all the soldiers are just sitting there like waving their swords and just saying, come back. And he can't come back for some reason, even though we see him reverse many times in the movie. I don't know what was going on there, but um as he goes along, there's all these obstacles in the way. There's, like I said, there's the pieces of track, those bars. There's an interesting stunt where he has to get on the front of the train. He actually has to get off of the train while the train's moving, and he picks up this big huge piece of wood, and he gets it just before the train like sort of lightly crashes into him, and he's on the front of the train with this big huge beam. And then there's another beam that's sitting there in front when he gets further down that he has to throw down onto the other beam and knock it out of the way. Some pretty cool things there. Now the Union Army disguised as Confederate soldiers. I think I missed that detail when I was mentioning this, because they had to disguise themselves as Confederates to do this plan. Um, to these guys see the train coming after them, and they just assume that since it's a Confederate train, that whole army is behind them, is behind Buster Keaton, but it's just him. They don't know that. So there's an idea like, why don't we go and fight them? And it's like, well, we are badly outnumbered. We wouldn't be able to go and fight them. That's the reason why they don't do that. And that's why they keep on trying to slow him down. And there's one point where they take off a car and they take off one of the cars of the train, and the car is supposed to slow him down. Buster Keaton shows up and runs into that car, but he's got a convenient way to he's got a convenient double track that comes up where he can divert the one car to go down, and then he's going to try to get ahead of it, but he somehow misses that. He doesn't, the train, that the part of the train is going down this one track and he's going on another track, and he still ends up behind that one train car, and which turns out to be fortunate, because there's another beam that is being thrown into the railroad onto the track, and because that's there, it derails that train car instead of derailing him. And so he keeps following. There's even another point where the Union Army has put a burning piece of train car on a bridge, hoping that it will get completely burn the bridge down. But Buster Keaton comes in before it can get burned and knocks it out of there. But eventually it gets to the point where they're on a higher track and he's on a lower track, and they notice that he is the only person that's on this train. So the idea is to go after him, and he realizes this and he hides. And there's a house nearby, and he goes into the house looking to spend the night. But lo and behold, the Union Army is going to spend the night in that house too, and they have his girlfriend as a hostage, which I had forgotten to tell in this thing. She ended up on the train when the Union Army stole the train, because she went back on, and she was the only person left. So they kidnapped her, and so there's a fun scene with him under the table, and like people keep on crossing their legs and hitting him in the face. And there's a guy who has a cigar that burns the tablecloth and through into his elbow. And then they pull up the tablecloth trying to get the fire out. And Buster Keaton's sitting there going like don't notice me, please. Then so he finds out that his girlfriend is kidnapped, is in this room. He goes and has a plan to put on a Union soldier uniform and knock out the guard that's outside the window, and then open the window and save his girlfriend. And guess what? He kept his word. He came back and only talked to her when he was in uniform.
Yep.
So he takes her out. It's, of course, it's pouring rain, and there is a bizarre set of circumstances after he takes her out of this room. There's a bear outside. There's a bear outside, and they actually step into a bear trap at one point. And yes. and seeing Buster Keaton trying to get out of that trap, first her leg, then his arms, then his own leg again, and so on and so on. They decide to spend the night in the woods under some cover of trees while it's raining. They make it through to the morning. The idea now is, because the Union Army is close to where their supply trains are and everything, to put her in a laundry bag and put her onto the Union train that's about to go the supply train that's about to go the other way. And then he will, once again, posing as a Union officer, will come back and then knock out some people on the front of the train and take the train for himself. And that's exactly what he does. And I'm going to skip ahead. I love this gag. He's knocked out some people to do this. And for the whole trip, we don't see any part of that area where like where the people he knocked out was. We just assume they're off the train at this point. And there's a point where after the girlfriend gets out and she does this sweep, she starts sweeping the floor or whatever. We notice that the dude is still lying unconscious on the floor. Like it just struck me as funny that he was still there the whole time. We have now is basically a reverse of what just happened in the first half of the movie. Now Buster Keaton, Johnny Gray, he's the one that's putting all the obstacles in the way of the pursuing Union train. But the problem for the Union Army is that Johnny Gray knows the railroads better than anybody, and he knows exactly what's going to screw these guys up. And he puts a number of obstacles in their way. including finally where he does a thing where where he's switching the track, but he puts a thing in there that bends the metal,
Yeah.
and it really fucks them up for a second. Like this is a problem that ruins them for a really long time. While they're doing that, there's a couple of other things that happen, because there's a lot of moments where the every time you think that Johnny Gray and his girlfriend have like every time you think that they've gotten away, there's some other new obstacle that pops up. Like they run out of water, or there's a lot of just different things that happen where they have to like back up the train, or they have to stop the train,
Yep.
or whatever. But this moment right here really does screw the Union Army up, to the point where Buster Keaton finally has the chance to try to burn a bridge that's very key to them, and he sets a fire to it. And once they finally solve the problem of this bent track, one of the Union like spies or somebody like that says, hey, the bridge that he's burning isn't burnt enough. You can go across it, no problem. Meanwhile, Johnny goes back and tells the Confederate Army, hey, this is what's happening. The Union Army's coming. You better be ready for this. The Union Army tries to go across the burning bridge, and then there is a spectacular crash that is for real. It took 6 cameras to shoot. You get the one angle, but 6 cameras, apparently 42 grand back in the 1920s.
Wow.
The most expensive shot in silent film history happens here, where the train crashes into the water below.
It's worth it.
It's totally worth it. And then another ensuing battle happens. There's a number of things that happen where, so Johnny like finally gets into the army, and he's been told to do something with the cannons, and every time he tries to tell somebody what to do with the cannons, that guy gets shot, and he goes to the next person and starts telling them, he gets shot. Next that guy gets shot, and then finally he's trying to pull out his sword or something, and it like slips out of his hand, and it ends up killing the guy that's been killing all the people that are around the cannon. And so we get to basically where we're at, whereas by the end of it, he does get officially enlisted into the army. He becomes a lieutenant. There's a funny scene where the unconscious guy is still there on the train. They take him in as a prisoner, I guess. And now that he's finally a part of the army, he can be with his girl. And but now that he's a lieutenant, he's got to salute everybody. So he has a hard time. They get on top of the train, and he wants to kiss her, but there's all these millions of soldiers walking by that he has to salute. So he has to find a way to both like kiss the girl and salute at the same time, and that's how our movie ends. And yay! No, I'm not going to say that, because that'll be taken out of context one day. Yeah, I was going to say something like "Yay for the Confederacy," but that's going to be taken out of context. Yeah, it's one of those happy endings where you're like, I'm happy for Buster Keaton. We know he's not a part of the Confederacy.
Right.
Whatever. I'm happy. That's how movies sort of get you into these type of things. We are happy for him, not happy for anybody else. And
there's a version of this movie that makes both armies like hapless and doesn't pick sides. But this one's not quite that. I really enjoyed this. I felt a lot like I did the first time I saw Citizen Kane, in that much of my enjoyment was in how impressed I was with the shots that he was pulling off. There's so many moving shots. And then after the train crashes, there's an all-out battle over the river, and we get a good solid section of wide screen. And I just remember thinking, the balls on this guy to try and shoot this complicated of a thing in the 20s. My God.
Yeah.
Like, it absolutely shows you why he and Charlie Chaplin are so famous and why they were so far ahead of their time. I think it's awesome to compare this to the Chaplin stuff we watched a couple weeks ago, because there are similarities, like the standing in line, but I found the comedy to be a lot more subtle from Buster
Mhm.
Keaton, whereas Chaplin is much more pronounced and over the top. And I think some of that is personality, and some of it is era, and some of it is the background. Like stage trained actors are taught to be more over the top, but Keaton's physical comedy almost is so subtle at times you don't see some of it.
Yeah.
Um, and like the bike is probably one of my favorite gags in the whole movie. My second
Mhm.
favorite one is when he jumps over the fire, but right through the slats of the bridge into
Yeah.
the water below. But the movie is full of stuff that's a lot more subtle than those moments, where if you're not really watching him, you might not realize how hard what he's doing is. Same goes for the girl who plays his girlfriend, who doesn't
Yeah.
get any of the credit that Buster Keaton gets, even though
Right.
her performance is just as physically impressive.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I was really impressed. I thought the main guy who stole the train in the beginning had kind of a Robert Shaw quality,
Mhm.
a
Yep.
look to him. But yeah, I was just stupid impressed, and a little ashamed I haven't gotten to this before now.
Mhm.
But now that I have, it's I feel like I understand its place in history a lot better.
Mhm. Yeah, and the thing that kills me about we sort of look at silent film as a, a place where they started just kind of like, well, they were experimenting some things. There's some things that were very groundbreaking or whatever. But not like it's not mind blowing blowing to us today. But I've seen some silent films, especially if you think about how long ago it was made, where they're doing stuff that just I'm like, I'm actually sitting here 100 years
Yeah.
away, going, how did they do that?
Yep.
Because they're not doing it digitally. So
Yeah. Exactly.
like a lot of this is being done for real and everything. So I saw a movie. Uh, a friend of mine had seen a special screening of a movie called Napoleon, a silent film called Napoleon. It was like
Hmm.
5 hours long. He saw it in some San Francisco theater, and there's a point in the movie where there's three screens up because the guy who shot Napoleon shot three cameras simultaneously
Mm.
to like to cover this giant battle that happens. And there's some things in Napoleon that you're going, whoa, I didn't know they knew how to do certain like this type of thing back then. And
Awesome.
so it's amazing when you see stuff like this back in the tens and twenties. So
But
yeah,
even the
exactly.
even the little bits work. Like it's audacious, some of the big stuff he stages, but there's a section where he's trying to get the girlfriend to put wood in the burner so the train can go faster, and she picks up a very modest small piece of wood, and he looks at her, and he bends over and picks up this little sliver and hands it to her, and she goes to put it in the furnace. Now after that he strangles her. It's not quite so funny,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
the
kind of a Homer Bart Simpson moment there where you're like,
yeah.
oh,
Just to stage this sarcastic, let's see how far she'll take it. Here, put this
yeah,
in there. And she's like, I'll just do whatever you tell me to do.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I was really, really impressed with this
yeah.
movie.
All right, well,
All right.
what is your super secret double feature for this month?
Had we not already done the Inspector General, I got a lot of Danny Kaye vibes. Of course, Danny Kaye comes along another couple decades after this, very heavily
Mhm,
influenced by this kind of filmmaking.
mhm,
Um, But I landed on one that I think is even better. In the chat, they got close today, but they didn't get close enough. I'm going with Shanghai Noon. Um, I feel like
okay,
this hits a lot of the same boxes. We're in the similar era.
mhm,
We have a lot of physical comedy in the Jackie Chan style of fighting.
mhm,
We even have a train where at one point our hero, Jackie Chan, uncouples the trailing car from the engine and gets away from the train.
mhm,
Um, and I think these early silent films are clearly a huge influence on the work of Jackie Chan. And
yeah,
so, for all of these reasons, we also have a main character who's had something stolen from him that he is
mhm,
on a quest to get back. I just feel like it ticks a lot of the same boxes and would be a nice where we started and where we were, 20 years ago, in sort of this
Yeah.
kind of storytelling. So
Yeah, I really like that. I really like that. That's a good one. I'm down with that. Absolutely. Haven't seen Shanghai Noon in forever, but
me either. And I'm worried some of it may not, like, it's Princess Pepe, and
oh,
his
right.
name is a John Wayne homophone. It's Chon
Mhm.
Wang.
Oh,
Um,
right, right, right.
I'm not sure how much of that kind of thing still plays.
Mhm.
But I remember really enjoying it. But yeah, I haven't seen it in probably 15, 20 years. But I just
All
felt
right.
like it
All
had the
right. Well, I
tone.
like that. I like that. Okay. So, what is next week's homework,
All
Jeremy?
right, next week's homework, which I only learned, I was today years old when I realized it goes out in the description of this episode we're recording now. So our chat is already aware. I never knew that. But it's Blood Diamond. Um, it's on HBO Max. This is a film that I did not see in theaters. I don't know that it was marketed very well.
Mhm.
Um, I was on, at the time, the longest flight I'd ever been on, to Seattle, and I had a laptop that had a few digital movies from a friend at work. I don't know how he got them. And Blood Diamond was
Mhm.
one of them, and I decided to watch it because I got more than enough time. And I just really, really enjoyed it. It's Jaimon Hansu in one of the best roles he's ever been given. I like to
Yep.
joke and complain that he's misused or barely used, and it's true. Um, he's one of our finest actors, and he gets treated like a character actor or something. I don't get it.
Right.
Um,
Yeah. Same.
Leo is also really good in this.
Mhm.
He's doing an accent that may take a little bit of time.
And I've
Um,
heard so many things about this accent. Like it's controversial in the fact that it sounds so weird, but I think it's pretty accurate if I've read
that's what I've read.
correctly. I've heard it's pretty accurate, but
Yeah.
who knows?
And Jennifer Connelly is in this as a journalist. Leo is playing basically a smuggler, and Jaimon Hansu has found the mother of all red tinged diamonds, pink diamonds. And
Mhm.
Leo is like, okay, I'll help you get the diamond out, and we work together. And he's really trying to basically just use this guy so he can get the diamond and he can sell it. It's about 2.5 hours long. It's only a 60 something on Rotten Tomatoes, but it's a whopping 8 out of 10 on IMDb, which says a lot.
Yeah. Mhm.
And I haven't seen it in probably 8 or 10 years, and I'm looking forward to going back and discovering this movie again. Again, it's on HBO Max, and it's Blood Diamond.
One of our probably most underrated directors ever too, on this one. Edward Zwick directed
Edward
this
Zwick.
one. So,
We will hear from him
he's
again on this podcast. I'm quite
oh,
certain.
for certain. For certain. All right.
All
We
right.
have some time for a couple of
We
questions.
have a little bit of time. A little bit of time. So with the ridiculous announcement of Gladiator 2, my question
Heh.
is a simple one. What is the most ridiculous sequel you could come up with?
Melancholia too. If you're not familiar with Melancholia, it's about people on the Earth who are waiting out their last days as another Earth, I think, is about to crash into them, or another planet is about to crash into them. So that would be ridiculous. I would also submit that there was honest discussion. I don't know if people were trolling or what. There was honest discussion about a Titanic 2
At one
in the
point,
like years past Titanic. Um and the only way I could see a Titanic 2 working is if you went back to the boat and had some other story to tell
right.
that was going on during that, or you decided to follow Rose afterwards and her boring marriage that she didn't care about enough to include in her
Yeah.
death dream at the end of the movie. Um, so yeah, there you go. That's my
Her
answer.
death dream. Well, if they weren't already actually making The Passion of the Christ 2, I would probably have thrown that out. But that is apparently in the works, and that's funny. But I
Mhm.
think Presumed Innocent 2 Like he gets accused of killing another
Yeah.
woman he's fucking.
Yes. Oh my god. Yes. And this time, his wife isn't the one who does it or whatever.
Oh man, I
Presumed
enjoyed that
innocent
question.
too. That would be excellent. That would be insane. I
Now
want to make that movie just because.
they're making a presumed innocent show with
Really?
it's Jake Gyllenhaal.
Hmm.
It's somebody who looks like Jake Gyllenhaal. I don't remember who, but and I'm curious. I mean, it might be good unless they make some massive changes. I don't know that that's going to hit for me the way the movie does, because again, as we've joked before, this movie sure has a thing that it does that is
Mm-hmm.
very unique, and
Yeah.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
What? Let's do one more. What TV show would you love to play as a game? And I guess that's
I
open
think
to video or board game.
Yeah, I think Lost would be a good video game, and
Ooh.
who knows? They may have made a Lost video game for all I know, but I was thinking something along the lines of a Space Quest kind of game back in the day, like a text based, some graphics maybe, whatever, but one of those things where you type in commands and you pick this up and enter that door and so on and so forth. Would be fun for Lost, because that was the fun of Lost, especially in the first couple of seasons where they kept going, getting into the hatch and finding all these different areas on the island where all this stuff going on. And I just remember how Lost just captivated the imagination when you saw all the different things that they were running into at the beginning of that show. And we don't need to talk about how it ended, but that's I think it would be a good game.
I think we're both showing our age, because I also went with a text prompt based game, and I want 16-bit choose your own wacky adventure Seinfeld games.
Okay.
Where it's like, let Kramer eat something from your fridge or tell Kramer no or whatever, and see what happens. And they fly in, a dozen different adventures, and I can choose which
I
way
could
to
get
go.
down with that. I could
I
get
think
down with that.
that
It's
would be
almost
fun.
like Leisure Suit Larry, except
Yes.
not
Yeah.
porno.
Yeah, exactly. Except for George's scenes would probably get a little porno here and there with the pastrami and whatnot.
Well, it looks like in the chat we've got like Murders in the Building crime puzzle game. That'd be
oh, that
cool.
sounds fun.
Game Night the Game would be awesome. Maniac Mansion meets Seinfeld. Yeah, that's what Slab's saying about your idea.
Awesome.
But anyway, that's going to be it for this episode. Next week is Blood Diamond. Thank you, chat, for coming out and watching us.
Thank you.
So appreciate you so much for coming out and supporting us and everything. But that's going to do it for this week. It's Chris Atkins and Jeremy Scott. See ya.
Goodbye.
Bye.